Welcome to this explainer. We are jumping right into something truly spectacular today, a literal geological miracle. We're talking about the rare, completely mesmerizing world of Alexandrite. And specifically, we're focusing on the legendary stones pulled from the gravels of Sri Lanka, or as it was historically known, Ceylon. We're going to balance the really rich, mystical lore of this gem, which some traditions actually call the stone of the shadow planet, with some hard-hitting, expert-level gemmological insights. So if you're a gem enthusiast, a history buff, or you just want to know exactly what to look for when making a serious investment, you are definitely in the right place.
Here is our roadmap for today's two-act journey. First, we'll cover the shadow planet's gem, Russia versus Ceylon, and the rare cat's eye. Then we pivot straight into our buyer's guide, hitting grading the color change, the synthetic stone warning, and always demand lab reports. Let's get right to it.
Section 1. The shadow planet's gem.
To really put the scarcity of this stone into perspective, Alexandrite accounted for less than 0.01% of all gemstones mined in 2025. I mean, it is a completely finite, highly elusive geological accident. There's this famous old gemmological saying, emerald by day, ruby by night, and that perfectly captures the stone's dramatic pleochroism. Now you might be wondering, why does it actually do this? Well, it's caused by these tiny trace amounts of chromium ions trapped right inside the chrysoberyl crystal lattice. So in daylight, which is super rich in blue and green wavelengths, the stone absorbs everything else and flashes this brilliant green. But put it under incandescent light, which is heavier in red wavelengths, and that exact same chromium causes the stone to reflect deep purplish reds. It's literally a chameleon.
Section 2. Russia versus Ceylon. So, not all Alexandrites are created equal, right? Geography completely dictates the optical personality of this gem. It was actually first discovered way back in 1830 in Russia's Ural Mountains. And those original Russian stones really set the gold standard. They had this incredibly crisp, vivid shift from a cool blue-green to a rich purplish red. But those Russian mines are pretty much totally exhausted today. Enter Sri Lanka, or Ceylon. Ceylon stones produce a noticeably softer, slightly more muted color transition. You're generally going to see a shift from a warmer yellow-green or olive-green in the daylight over to a purplish red or raspberry red under warm light.
Now you might be thinking, okay, if the Russian color is the strict standard, why on earth are Ceylon stones so legendary? Well, it's not just about the color. It's about sheer, mind-boggling size and incredibly high transparency. To put that into perspective, take a look at the number 65.7. That is the exact carat weight of the massive Smithsonian Alexandrite, which was sourced straight from Sri Lanka. To realize how insane that is, most Alexandrites are well under a single carat. Finding one this massive and clear is basically like finding a unicorn in your backyard. That incredible clarity and sheer size is exactly what cements Sri Lankan material as absolute royalty in the gem world.
Section 3. The rare cat's eye.
Beyond that famous color shift, those Sri Lankan alluvial gravels produce another exceptionally rare and highly prized optical phenomenon. It's an effect called chatoyancy, or the simophone effect. Basically, this happens when specific types of long, thin inclusions, usually rutile silk, are perfectly aligned parallel to each other inside the gem. When a cutter shapes this into a smooth, domed cabochon, it creates this razor-sharp silver streak of light across the top that actually opens and closes just like a feline eye when you move it around. This cat's eye effect, when combined with the color change, creates the ultimate rarity. And what's super fascinating here is that in Vedic astrology, this specific gem is deeply revered as the gemstone of Ketu, the shadow planet. It's believed to carry really intense karmic energy, which brilliantly brings our whole mystical lore full circle. All right, transitioning into Act 2 here, we really have to ask the critical question. How exactly do you buy a geological miracle like this without getting scammed? Because let's be real, the consumer market for these stones can be an absolute minefield. We really need to arm ourselves with expert knowledge.
Section 4. Grading the color change.
What's really interesting about grading Alexandrite is how gemmologists mathematically judge the quality of that shift. It's not just a subjective vibe. Professionals grade the strength of the color transition by a strict percentage, while a top-tier, museum-grade investment gem ideally boasts an 85 to 95% transition. Most modern natural stones actually average a shift somewhere between 50 and 80%. They might hold on to a little bit of that green when they shift to red, which gives them a slightly muddy undertone. Lab-grown stones, on the other hand, consistently hit 100%. They offer this completely crisp, almost unnatural transition from teal to red purely because they are grown in perfectly controlled laboratory environments, completely free of nature's chaotic variables. Which brings us to a crucial point you absolutely must remember. Saturation matters way more than size. If a stone is too light, you just aren't going to see a strong shift, period. It lacks the color intensity. But conversely, if a stone is way too dark, it lacks brightness and just ends up looking black. So if you're in the market, a smaller stone with a vibrant, punchy color change is vastly superior and honestly far more valuable than a massive, chunky stone with weak, washed-out colors. Strong saturation has to be your absolute highest priority.
Section 5. The synthetic stone warning. We have to issue a pretty strict warning here regarding too-good-to-be-true prices, especially in a market that's heavily saturated with synthetics. There are stark fundamental differences between an earth-mined heirloom and a lab alternative. Natural Alexandrite takes literally millions of years to form. It's a chaotic geological accident, so it almost always features internal birthmarks, things like silk inclusions or little liquid fingerprints. Lab-created stones, however, are totally different. True synthetic Alexandrite is grown using the highly precise Chozorowski-Pold method. As a result, they are almost universally eye-clean. But buyer beware, okay? Often, what gets sold to tourists as cheap Alexandrite is actually just a simulant. Specifically, color change synthetic sapphire, which is just lab corundum, not authentic chrysoberyl at all. If the price seems impossibly low for a large, totally flawless stone, you are almost certainly looking at a lab-grown simulant.
Section 6. Always demand lab reports.
Because it is incredibly difficult, almost impossible really, to tell a high-quality synthetic from a natural stone with just the naked eye. We arrive at the single most vital step of our buying guide. You must explicitly demand documentation from a reputable jeweler, period. Insist on getting an independent lab report from a respected third-party authority like the GIA or the IGI. That report is your absolute proof. It's going to verify that the chemical species is actually genuine chrysoberyl. It will confirm its geographic origin, whether it's from the famed gravels of Sri Lanka or elsewhere. And most importantly, it's going to prove the stone is natural and completely untreated. Having this paperwork is quite literally the only way to secure a true natural investment and guarantee its resale value down the line.
So I want to leave you with this provocative thought. The next time you're walking around and you see a massive, flawless, perfectly color-changing stone sitting in a jeweler's window, will you see a geological miracle or will you spot the synthetic illusion? Hopefully this explainer has empowered you. You are now armed with the history, the ancient lore of the shadow planet, and the hardcore technical metrics to know the difference. Thanks so much for exploring this with me today, and hey, happy gem hunting!